Howdy. Oh, hey. Yo. Hey everybody, sorry this is getting weird in here. I'm Chauncey Secrist. I'm a multimedia artist. I'm going to talk to you about making art when you don't have access to regular art supplies. So let's get away from all the weirdness and let's talk about art. Okay, I'm back and I'm ready to talk about art. But first, why the stupid costumes? What does it have to do with art? Well, probably not much. It was fun, I felt like doing it, and it's something I could do with stuff around the house. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, is making art when you don't have access to regular art supplies and just having fun with it. So there's really a lot you can do. Obviously, you can make a stupid video with your phone. I have friends in high school that when they got bored, they made their own sketch comedy show. You can use the camera, or you can use your phone to take photographs, do weird still lifes, abstract compositions, self-portraits, etc. Got pencils, drawing's always an option. Personally, I'm a big fan of collage and assemblage. So paper, random objects, broken things, bones, all manner of junk can be rearranged and stuck together to make art. So when I started making this video, I thought I was going to make some sort of instructional video. Then I started making it, and as I played the video back to myself, I realized I was bored out of my skull, and you would be too. I also realized we're talking about collage and assemblage, and it not only sounded boring, but kind of condescending. I'm sure you already know how to cut stuff, and I'm pretty sure you probably know how to use glue. So I may offer occasional tips or suggestions, but I'm not going to sit here and try to teach you how to use scissors. I'm going to assume you know that much already. So instead, I want to go briefly into the history of this kind of work, and then just explore some of the specific works, my work, and some of the things that you might want to think about that you can use in your own work while you're working from home without regular art supplies. First, let's talk about history. For this, we're going to go all the way back to 2nd century China, the Han Dynasty. Enter Kai Lun, whose name I probably just butchered, and who, more importantly, is the guy who invented paper. So following the invention of paper, naturally, people made art out of it. And the first paper art was paper cutting. The earliest example that we have is from the 6th century, and it looks a bit like the snowflakes kids make every winter. At the time, paper was still a bit of a rarity, so this was an art form that could only be enjoyed by the wealthy. But it's definitely something you could do now at home almost for free. Later, in 12th century Japan, calligraphers pasted together torn pieces of paper onto which they would write poetry. Again, a great way to use old scraps and a fun way to mix visual and written art forms really inexpensively. Much later, in the 1860s, upper-class English women made these really cool photo collages. I would argue that these are the first true collages as we understand collage, but some argue it's more craft, like scrapbooking, than it is fine art. I fail to see any real distinction personally. All I know is these Duck Ladies by Kate Edith Goff are awesome. Most historians and art institutions, contrary to my belief about the photo collages from the 1860s, claim the birth of collage was truly in 1912 with George Braque's famous Fruit Dish and Glass, in which pieces of patterned wallpaper were cut and pasted into a charcoal drawing. He was immediately followed by his friend and collaborator, Pablo Picasso, who was likely the first to incorporate it into his paintings instead of into drawings. The first example of that being still life with chair caning, which uses commercially made oilcloth printed with a cane chair pattern and uses a textured rope as a frame. After Braque and Picasso started incorporating found objects into their work, it opened up a world of possibilities for other artists to experiment. Things go pretty wild from this point forward. So Marcel Duchamp, who was also a cubist like Braque and Picasso, is credited with creating the first ready-made, an artwork in which the object is simply found, repositioned, signed, and called art without any real alteration by the artist. Now, while he did coin the term in 1916, some argue it was actually the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven who invented the style. Either way, things get real weird here and also really relevant to the topic at hand. They found beauty in all sorts of materials, from urinals to bicycle wheels to odd bits of plumbing. And some of these ideas take shape in various art movements around the world. In Japan and Korea, artists from the Mono-ha movement explored the relationship between natural and industrial materials. In Italy in the 60s and 70s, arte povera arose. The name literally means poor art. They were using common, everyday materials as a means of attacking the values of established institutions and promoting art that was free of convention, markets, and power structures. More recently, in the 1990s, until just a few years ago when he sadly passed away, Tony Fair again found new uses for everyday materials. Blue painter's tape affixed in intricate patterns on windows, plastic strawberry cartons stacked into a pyramid, soda bottles filled with colored liquid. Nothing was too mundane for Tony to turn into art. Okay, that's a lot of history in a short period, but I think that an understanding of art history can help us see what's possible for the future of our own art and art in general. Seeing how others have pushed boundaries can help us find the courage to do the same. Um, Now, I'd like to show you a little bit of what I do as an artist and talk about how all this comes together. These days, I'm primarily a sculptor using a variety of found objects. I collect things that I find everywhere. For example, this wooden panda was found in an elementary school parking lot, and the bones were found out in the west desert of Utah. This metal spike was found near a railroad somewhere out in the Nevada desert, and the rock was just outside of my art studio in Sugar House. Already had the red paint on it when I picked it up. So I never know what objects are going to speak to me, but I've always got my eyes open for things, and I hope you will too. So if you're like me and you pick up a lot of random things, start arranging them. Put them together, think about how different objects can play off of each other to create interesting compositions, how they can interact to tell a story or convey a message, or even how they can just make something that's funny. If, however, you're not a scavenger like me, don't fret, there's still a lot that you can do. If you have old magazines, books that you don't want anymore, photographs that don't warrant keeping around, or even just all of that annoying junk mail that shows up, collage, just plain old like regular paper collage, is a great option. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I've spent a lot of time at home washing my hands, doing my best to neither contract nor spread the virus. Unfortunately, the majority of my art materials are at my studio, shown here, which is several miles from my house, so I've made do with what I have at home. Now, because I'm kind of weird, I do have a lot of weird stuff laying around, like this selection of color-matching tooth samples from a dentist's office. Why is that one green? Or these bits from a bike ride by the Salt Lake. Or this glass case full of bones that I've collected. But for the most part, I've been more limited. Stacks of old magazines have been a primary source of materials. Honestly, I don't even know where half of these came from, but they're full of interesting colors, shapes, and images that are great for collage. Even garbage works. I hope your garbage isn't this bad, but if it is, well, take some of those bottles and make something like Tony Fair. This collage of mine was done on a piece of cardboard salvaged from the recycle bin. That's the inside of a Sour Patch Kids box. Again, the point of all of this is to think creatively and to really consider what you mean when you think about art supplies. Everything can be made into art. Your job as the artist is to see the spectacular in the ordinary. Now, my time is about up, so I want to hit on a couple of last things really quickly. I said early on that I didn't want to tell you how to cut things up and glue them together, and that's true. But one of the most asked questions that collage artists get is, what kind of glue do you use and how do you keep the paper from bubbling? So I'm going to touch on that really quick, and then I want to talk briefly about some fun art games. So glue, it's exciting. For paper collage, I use two things almost exclusively. For larger pieces of paper, Scotch brand Photo Mount spray adhesive is my favorite. This stuff is not very forgiving, so you have to be careful. Once you glue something down, you're not going to be able to readjust it. But it holds really well. There's no bubbling of the paper. You do want to do it outside or in a well-ventilated area, probably with a mask on. Fumes, not so great. The other, for smaller bits of paper, you need something a little different, and as silly as it might sound, just a regular old Elmer's glue stick works wonders for little pieces. Easy cleanup, non-toxic, great stuff, and super cheap. If you're going to start working into adhering larger objects, bits of metal or bone or wood, a lot of artists swear by E6000 glue, which is great. Personally, I prefer the Loctite brand. Either way, it's really easy to find and it's relatively inexpensive. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is art games. The Surrealists were the best at this, in my opinion. One great game that I enjoy is called Cubomania, in which a photograph is cut into equal-sized squares and rearranged automatically or at random, like this piece by Kevin Roque, or this piece by Gerasim Luka. My personal favorite is an old game called Exquisite Corpse, which requires a group of artists collaborating on a single piece without knowing what the other artists are doing. It's usually done with a figure. The first artist will draw the head, fold the paper back so that just the littlest bit of the neck is showing. The next artist will draw the upper part of the torso, fold it back, and so on. This continues until the figure is complete. It can also be adapted to poetry using stanzas instead of body parts, or as a painting instead of a drawing, as in these examples, which were done by me and a group of local artist friends. I really hope you found this video interesting and helpful, and remember, anything can be made into art. You just have to figure out how. So keep looking for creative uses for different materials, keep making art, and most importantly, keep having fun while you're doing it.